Do you think that Muslims in this country are discriminated against? Like,
I
is
mean,
the resume example, is
I
that
would say,
telling of a broader?
yeah, I would say yes. I mean, I guess certainly at that stage, the evidence, in my view, is there um, for discrimination. And now, there are people who say that once people sit down at an interview stage, then those prejudices fall away. You treat the person more as an individual. I think it probably depends what kind of Muslim. I mean, if they have a headscarf on, then probably that's not, probably there will be a prejudice there. And there have been studies in Germany that even if you keep the name as a Turkish name, if you put a headscarf on or remove a headscarf, that has a big impact on callbacks. So yeah, is there discrimination there? I think undoubtedly there's a certain level of discrimination. Yes.
I don't know the difference, candidly, between like what is considered systemic versus individual, but
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know the term, to me, I don't know if it matters. Like where I think what matters more is like, is it a problem? What's the implication? How do we, what do we do about it? So we don't have to use the word systemic, but if you're in agreement that there's a kind of large scale discrimination against Muslims in this country,
Well, I wouldn't say large. I don't know if it's large scale. I think there is,
yeah,
but how much it would impact on a job search for a Muslim individual and they're rising through organizations, and I think that's yet to be quantified.
okay.
I don't know how big it is. I think it's not zero. I certainly think it's not zero.
Yeah. And final question on this, what do we do about it other than the resume thing? Like if we do, like, is there other things we should do about it? Or I guess like what levers do you focus on in that case?
Well, I think we should be measuring, I do think we should be measuring outcomes, how many people applied, what's their religion, what's their ethnicity, whatever, what's their sex, how many proceeded to the next stage, I think we should definitely be monitoring. And if there is a disproportionate impact, we should, and it can't be explained by performance measures, then yeah, that is grounds for taking some kind of action. What is it? What is the reason? I think then you would probably have to try and figure out what the reason is qualitatively, then develop some questions that can be used on a larger scale quantitative survey, and then design your policies using randomized controlled trials. What actually works? So I would,
yeah. What would a policy look like? Like you don't want to focus on outcome, right? Well, so what do we do?
Well, no, you do focus on outcomes, but you're also controlling for confounding factors. So if, just to take a crude example, if every Muslim applicant didn't have a degree or didn't make their sales target, then clearly those, you have to control for these other confounding factors. And if you still have an unexplained difference by religion, then you've got discrimination there. I think that's legitimate. So I don't think people on my side of the ledger would dispute that that's legitimate. And therefore you need.
And then what do you do? What do you do if there is legitimate racial discrimination that can't be explained by other confounding factors?
Well, I think, I think it's fine to have, if you want to talk about diversity training, it's fine to talk about the results of these studies and to show, actually, look here, we've identified, we've controlled for all these other factors. There's a whole literature that's done all these studies that's attempted to refute these results, and look, they've all finding the same thing. This is the size of the effect, and this is what we're going to do. So I would say, well, let's test out a few things. I mentioned, blind CVs. I mentioned, maybe doing interviews with people who are hiring and people who are not hiring to find out why the person wasn't hired, and then trying to address why that is the case. Did it happen because of a performance at an interview stage? What element of performance? What kind of coaching? You can coach groups that don't do well, and just but the main thing I'd say, if you're going to do the diversity training, is not to make it.
I'm not saying I didn't say diversity training. I didn't say we should do that. It's a genuine. I don't have really a hidden agenda. It's a genuine question. Like, if there is racism, I don't know much about diversity training, frankly. I've heard,
but I'd also say, by the way,
well, my question is like a genuine question. Like, what do we do? Like, if there's racism and it's not because
Yeah, I think monitoring, training, procedures like getting rid of interviews and blinding surveys, or the resumes, taking the names off the resumes, the
Yeah.
pictures off the resumes, which I think they do already to some degree. The only thing I'd say is that we also have to focus on, like, if someone's in a wheelchair, if somebody is short or very tall or not, very fat. There are a whole bunch of other things, has a stutter. There may be a whole bunch of other things that are also other things that would make you less successful. So there's other kinds of discrimination other than race, gender, sexuality, which don't get much attention because they're not politically important and meaningful in this ideology. And so I would like to see a much more rounded set of characteristics so that when you do your diversity training, you're talking about everybody doing it to everybody, not just whites doing it to non-white. It's actually everyone on everyone. We're talking about many more types of categories that are important for discrimination, for privilege, than just the Holy Trinity. So that's all I'm saying is that we need to. So I would accept that if that was what DEI was, and we were talking about even, even people with tattoos. I don't have a tattoo, but there's a whole set of different way of doing this that is much less the narrative and the binary just feeding into the same woke trinity. And that's kind of where I think that should go.
Got it. Got it. On so just doing a quick check in here. I really appreciate this, man. This is
Yeah.
really fascinating, and I think these are important topics. And I've been kind of debating you so much that I haven't really been able to dig into some of these other things.
It's fine. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the chat. The pushback is good, and
because not everyone pushes back. It's like Constantine and Jordan Peterson. Like they are drinking your Kool-Aid, And,
yeah.
And
yeah. No, exactly. And it's fun to have in some ways it's more fun to have the pushback because you get to kind of say, okay, where are the differences here? And also maybe gets to some kind of an accommodation or at least we can see, okay, maybe you value equality more. I value, freedom and merit or whatever, or maybe not, but at least you kind of get to see where the differences are.
Yeah. Everything is so polarized, and like the irony to me, like maybe I'm being very naive by saying like, oh, well, we all want the same thing. Like, yeah, Hitler, every evil person out there has what they would consider good intentions. Like everyone cares about safety, security, health, and happiness. And so it's naive for me to say, oh, well, you have the same, goals as a woke activist. But I mean, beyond my naivete, like I think there's a deeper truth there, which is the irony here is like you're expending a lot of resources and energy to find cultural solutions, and so are the woke activists, and they're doing it so in very different ways. And I think your point is that they're doing so in a very dogmatic way. I think that most of the country, I would hope, is somewhere in the middle where they want to see change. They hopefully have some ability to suss through data. But I don't. It would be unfortunate. I'll say this: it would be unfortunate if people, like whether they're on the left or in the middle, were to view anti-woke policies as necessarily racist policies or as people that don't care about the issues. When in fact, I think it's the opposite, right? I think that it's because you care about equality, it's because you care about justice, that you think wokeness is infringing on it.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's part of the reason, right? So I care. I mean, assuming that the woke people do want convergence of narrowing of inequality, then yes, that's a shared value. But I also think they probably don't value some of the things that I would value. So they probably wouldn't value as highly freedom of expression, equal treatment, objective truth, these sorts of things, or indeed probably social cohesion and certainly the attachments of majority groups, ethnic majorities to the nation, to their, these are all things, or males. So I think those sorts of things would come quite low. You see that in the survey data where, so white liberals tend to be cooler towards white people, tend to not be attached to being white, let's just say, whereas members of minority groups, regardless of their politics, tend to be more attached to their group than to other groups. So to some extent, white liberals really are an exception on this. So they don't have a real group identity, and they tend to have weaker weaker identification to the nation, let's just say. So, and of course, that's fine. I mean, not everybody, it's like, do you really love, are you super attached to your extended family? Some are, some aren't. I mean, it's fine. It's a choice. But I just think there are also differences of value as well as shared values, but different approaches, which is what we're talking about with equality. I think there's a shared value that a lot of people have, but a different view as to what's going to get us there. But in other cases, there are wholly different values. So I don't think a lot of people on the progressive cultural left care that much about their white identity, and they don't care that much. They care less about national traditions, for example, speech traditions, classical literature, and so on.